Welcome to the Unreal BootCamp lesson on incrementing user statistics. In this lesson, we're going to modify the example game to increment the 3 user statistics that we defined in a previous lesson. To do that, we'll need to use the increment user stats request. This request requires one parameter, a string that contains the statistic names and how much the values have been incremented by. Click the JSON response to familiarize yourself with the data that the request will return. Notice that an updated list of statistics is returned. We'll go over the significance of this in a few moments. Scroll up and notice that there are complex operations that are supported with this request. Click the Statistics Grammar section link. These complex operations can be applied to both global statistics and user statistics. We won't be using any of these operations in this lesson, but it's good to know that they exist. Once you're done scrolling through the complex statistic operations, head over to the brainCloud portal. We're going to try out the increment user stats request in the Cloud Code API Explorer. Authenticate. Then from the service drop-down list, select Player Statistics. From the operation drop-down list, select Read All User Stats. Click Execute to run the request. In the response, copy the statistic names and their values. From the operations drop-down list, select Increment User Stats. In the parameter section, paste in the statistics that we just copied and format them with some data. Click Execute to run the request. Notice in the response the statistics have been updated and their current values have been returned. In your game or app, it's important to update the list of statistics with the values that the response returns. You'll see an example of this shortly when we implement the increment user stats request in the example game. Let's increment the user stats one more time. In the parameters section, format the statistic values, then click Execute. Notice in the response that the statistic values that we just incremented were added to the existing values. We're done in the brainCloud portal. Open Xcode and navigate to the network callback.h file. Declare a pair of callback methods for incrementing the user statistics. Notice that the completed callback method has a parameter of type const reference to a vector of statistic objects. This is the same type of parameter as the completed callback method from the previous lesson. You may be wondering why we need to return a vector of statistic objects when we increment them. It's possible that a user's account is logged in from 2 separate devices and playing the game on both devices. brainCloud will keep track of the statistic increments from both devices. This is why we update the client's list of statistics on an increment request. The same logic would apply though to global statistics as well. Navigate to the networkmanager.h file. Declare a public method called increment user statistics. This method takes an f-string of formatted JSON data to send to the server. Scroll down and declare a pair of private callback functions to handle the incrementing user statistics request. Make sure to mark these methods as a U function with the callback category. Finally, declare a private network callback handler object called mincrementUserStatsCallback. Navigate to the networkmanager.cpp file. In the constructor, bind the private callback methods to the callback handler's success and failure delegates. Next, implement the increment user statistics method. First, check to see if the user is authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, log a meaningful error message, and then if the callback pointer is set, invoke the callbacks on increment user statistics failed method. If the user is authenticated, invoke the brainCloud's player statistics services increment user stat request. Pass in the formatted JSON string and the address of the increment user stats callback object as the arguments. Scroll down. Implement the onIncrement user stats callback method. In the body, log the response data. Then declare a vector of statistic objects called statisticsList. Create a JSON reader using the JSON response data. Then declare a JSON object and using the JSON reader, deserialize the JSON data. If the JSON data was deserialized successfully, we can now start to parse the data. Get the data JSON object from the root JSON object. Then get the statistics array from the data JSON object. Loop through each element in the statistics array and parse the statistic name and value. Use the constant statistics description map to determine the description. Create a statistic object using the name, description, and value, and push the object onto the back of the statistics list vector. Once all the statistics have been parsed, if the callback pointer is set, invoke the callbacks on increment user statistics completed method, and pass in the statistics list vector as the argument. Next, implement the onIncrement user stats error method. Log an error message along with a JSON error. If the callback pointer is set, invoke the callbacks on increment user statistics failed method. Navigate to the statisticsmanager.h file. Declare a public method called getFormatIncrementsData. Navigate to the statisticsmanager.cbp file. Implement the getFormatIncrementsData method. This method will loop through all the statistics and format an f-string variable with each statistic object's increment value. Once we have looped through all the statistic objects, return the formatted JSON data. Navigate to the spaceshooter GameModeBase.h file. Override the onIncrementUserStatistics completed method. Navigate to the spaceshooter GameModeBase.cbp file. Scroll down to the bottom. Implement the onIncrementUserStatistics completed method. In the body, invoke the Statistics Manager's setStatistics method. Pass in the statistics parameter as the argument. Scroll up and find the onShipHasExploded method. In this method, we're going to get the games played statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Then invoke the Statistics Manager's getFormatIncrementsData method, and then invoke the Network Manager's incrementUserStats method, pass in the formatted JSON data in as the argument. We're only going to call the incrementUserStatistics method when the game ends. It doesn't make sense to keep sending increment data to brainCloud every time a statistic increases, but rather when our game ends, which in this case is when the ship explodes. There's one more situation where the game can end, and that's when the boss is defeated in Horde mode. In the method below, in the onBossHasExploded method, we're going to get the games played statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Then invoke the Statistics Manager's getFormatIncrementsData method, and then invoke the Network Manager's incrementUserStats method, pass in the formatted JSON data in as the argument. Now all that's left to do is increment the appropriate statistic objects when an asteroid or an enemy is destroyed. Navigate to the enemy.cbp file. Scroll down and find the notifyActorBeginOverlap method. In the highlighted if statement, get the enemy's killed statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Notice that we are not sending the increments to the brainCloud server. We only send the statistic increments when the game is over. Navigate to the ship.cbp file. Scroll down and find the notifyActorBeginOverlap method. In the highlighted if statement, get the asteroid's destroyed statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Then in the highlighted if statement below, get the enemy's killed statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Navigate to the asteroid.cbp file. Scroll down and find the notifyActorBeginOverlap method. In the highlighted if statement, check to see if the color of the laser colliding with the asteroid is blue. The game is designed so that only the player can shoot blue lasers. Then we'll get the asteroid's destroyed statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. Navigate to the boss.cbp file. Scroll down and find the notifyActorBeginOverlap method. In the highlighted if statement, get the enemy's killed statistic object from the Statistics Manager and apply an increment to it. We are now done hooking up our statistics to our game logic. Click the Run button to build the project and launch the Unreal editor. In the Unreal editor, run the game. Before we play, open the statistics dialog and let's check the current statistics values. This user hasn't played yet, so the values are all at 0. Let's change that. Close the dialog and from the main menu, click Endless Mode. To save time, video playback has been sped up. The player has exploded and the game is over. The user statistic increments are then sent to brainCloud. brainCloud then sends back the updated user statistic values. Checking the brainCloud statistics dialog, you'll notice that the statistics have been updated. Close the dialog and then select New Game. Again, to save time, the video playback has been sped up. The player has exploded and the game is over. Let's check out the statistics dialog. You'll notice that the user statistics that we just submitted were added to the existing user statistic values that were already on the brainCloud server. How to set up achievements is the next lesson in the Unreal BootCamp.